I never expected my life to change so dramatically the day James moved in next door. I was 28, focused on my career as a software developer, and had never given much thought to my sexuality. But there was something about him that caught my attention from the moment he stepped out of the moving truck. James was in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confidence that comes with age and experience. He was a literature professor at the local university, recently divorced, and had moved to our quiet suburban neighborhood for a fresh start. Our first interaction was simple enough. I helped him carry some boxes into his house. He thanked me with a warm smile that made my heart skip a beat, though I didn't understand why at the time. "I'm David," I introduced myself, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach when our hands met in a handshake. "James," he replied, his voice deep and warm. "Thanks for the help, neighbor." Over the next few weeks, we developed a casual friendship. He'd wave when I left for work in the morning, and sometimes we'd chat over the fence about nothing in particular. I found myself looking forward to these brief interactions more than I cared to admit. One evening, as I was struggling with my lawnmower, James came over to help. He was wearing a fitted t-shirt that showed off his still athletic build, and I caught myself staring more than once. "You know," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "I'm making pasta tonight. Why don't you join me as thanks for all your help when I moved in?" I agreed without hesitation, though my heart was racing. His kitchen was warm and inviting, filled with the aroma of garlic and herbs. He moved with grace as he cooked, telling me stories about his time in Italy where he'd learned to make pasta from scratch. "Wine?" he offered, already pouring 2 glasses of red. That first dinner changed everything. We talked for hours about books, movies, our lives. James had been married for 15 years before realizing he couldn't live a lie anymore. The way he spoke about it with such honesty and vulnerability made something stir inside me. "It's never too late to be honest with yourself," he said, his eyes meeting mine across the table. "Sometimes we spend years hiding from who we really are." I felt exposed, like he could see right through me. When our hands brushed as we cleared the dishes, the electricity between us was undeniable. After that dinner, something shifted between James and me. Our casual, neighborly interactions became charged with unspoken tension. I found myself making excuses to see him, borrowing tools I didn't need, asking for advice about my garden despite having no real interest in gardening. James seemed to understand what was happening before I did. He was patient, never pushing, but always there with that knowing smile that made my knees weak. One Saturday morning, I was jogging past his house when he called out to me. He was doing yoga on his back deck, shirtless in the morning sun. I nearly tripped over my own feet. "Want to join?" he asked, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I had never done yoga in my life, but I found myself saying yes. He helped me through basic poses, his hands occasionally guiding my body into the correct positions. Each touch sent electricity through my skin. "You're tense," he observed, his hands on my shoulders. "Relax, breathe." But how could I relax when he was so close, when I could feel the heat radiating from his body? After the impromptu yoga session, he invited me in for coffee. We sat at his kitchen counter, and I couldn't help but notice how the morning light caught the silver in his hair. "David," he said softly, "I think we should talk about what's happening here." My heart began racing. "What do you mean?" "I see the way you look at me," he said, his voice gentle but direct, "and I want you to know that it's okay. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay." I stared into my coffee cup, unable to meet his eyes. I haven't. "I know," he said, "and we don't have to do anything about it, but I want you to know that you're safe here with me." When I finally looked up, the understanding in his eyes nearly broke me. He reached across the counter and placed his hand over mine. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like coming home. "I don't know what I'm doing," I whispered. "Nobody ever does," he smiled. "That's part of the journey." That touch, that conversation opened a floodgate. All the feelings I'd been suppressing, not just about James, but my entire identity came rushing to the surface. I spent the next few days in a daze, questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. For the next week, I threw myself into work, trying to avoid thinking about that morning with James. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt his hands on my shoulders, saw his understanding smile. Late one Friday night, after too many hours staring at code, I heard music drifting from James's house. It was Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, one of my favorites. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was walking across our shared lawn. James opened the door before I could knock. He was holding a glass of whiskey, looking relaxed in a dark blue sweater that made his eyes seem impossibly deep. "I was hoping you'd come over," he said, stepping aside to let me in. His living room was dimly lit, books scattered everywhere. A record player in the corner was spinning vinyl, filling the room with melancholic music. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, already pouring me a drink. "Haven't been sleeping much lately," I admitted, accepting the glass. Our fingers brushed, and I didn't pull away this time. "Want to talk about it?" I took a long sip of whiskey, letting the warmth spread through my chest. "I'm scared," I finally said. James sat down beside me on the couch, close enough that our thighs touched. "Of what?" "Everything. These feelings, what they mean, what people would think, my family," I trailed off, overwhelmed. "I remember that fear," he said softly. "When I first admitted to myself that I was gay, I thought my world would end. My marriage, my career, my relationships with family. I thought I'd lose it all. Did you lose everything?" He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I lost some things, my marriage, obviously, some friends, but I gained something more valuable, myself. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without thinking." I reached out and touched his face, feeling the slight roughness of his evening stubble. James stayed perfectly still, letting me explore this new territory at my own pace. "David," I whispered, and then I was kissing him. It was nothing like kissing women. His lips were firm, confident. He tasted like whiskey and something uniquely male. His hand came up to cup the back of my neck, and I melted into him. When we finally broke apart, I was trembling. He pressed his forehead against mine, both of us breathing heavily. "We can take this as slow as you need," he murmured. But I didn't want slow. Years of repression and denial had created a hunger I couldn't control. I kissed him again, harder this time, with all the desperation I'd been holding back. That night changed everything. James led me upstairs to his bedroom, his hand warm and steady in mine. I was nervous, but the way he looked at me with such patience and desire made me feel safe. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said, pulling me close. But I wanted everything. I wanted to experience all the things I denied myself for so long. His kisses grew more intense, and soon we were undressing each other, hands exploring unfamiliar territory. James was beautiful in the morning light. Moonlight streaming through his window. His body was mature, but well-maintained, with broad shoulders and a light dusting of silver hair across his chest. He took his time with me, teaching me how to touch, how to please another man. "You're perfect," he whispered against my skin, making me shiver. That first time was a blur of sensation and emotion. James was gentle but passionate, guiding me through each new experience with careful attention. When it was over, we lay tangled in his sheets, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "Are you okay?" he asked, running his fingers through my hair. I nodded, unable to find words for the mix of emotions coursing through me: relief, excitement, fear, and something that felt dangerously like love. The next morning I woke up alone in his bed. For a moment, panic seized me. Had I made a huge mistake? Then I smelled coffee and heard movement downstairs. I found James in the kitchen, wearing only pajama bottoms, making breakfast. He smiled when he saw me, and my anxiety melted away. "Good morning," he said, pulling me in for a kiss that tasted like coffee and pancakes. We spent that entire weekend together, barely leaving his house. Between passionate encounters, we talked for hours. James told me about his journey to self-acceptance, his failed marriage, the challenges of coming out later in life. My ex-wife actually became one of my closest friends, he said, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as we lay in bed. She was angry at first, but eventually she understood that I hadn't meant to hurt her. I just couldn't pretend anymore. I'm terrified of telling my family, I admitted. They're very traditional. You don't have to tell them until you're ready, he assured me. This is your journey, at your pace. As spring turned to summer, James and I fell into a comfortable rhythm. During the day, we maintained our separate lives, me at my tech company, him at the university, but nights and weekends belonged to us. We had to be careful, of course. Our neighborhood wasn't particularly progressive, and we knew that not everyone would understand. We developed a system of subtle signals. His porch light on meant it was safe to come over. Blinds drawn meant we needed privacy. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together in his kitchen, our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, dropped by unexpectedly. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers, but she had already seen us standing suspiciously close. "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her eyes darting between us. "I just wanted to return your casserole dish." James handled it smoothly, thanking her, while I pretended to be very interested in stirring the sauce. After she left, we burst into nervous laughter. "That was close," I said, my heart still racing. "She definitely suspects something," James replied, pulling me back into his arms. "Does that scare you?" I thought about it for a moment. Less than it would have a few months ago. Our relationship wasn't just physical, though. The chemistry between us was intense. James introduced me to classical literature, reading poetry to me in bed. I taught him about technology, setting up his smart home devices and explaining cryptocurrency over wine. But it wasn't all romantic dinners and passionate nights. We had our challenges, too. James was more established in his identity, more comfortable being out. Sometimes my need for discretion frustrated him. "I understand why you're not ready," he said, one night after I ducked into his garage to avoid being seen by passing neighbors. "But I hope someday you won't feel like you have to hide." The age gap occasionally caused tension, too. James had already experienced so much of life: marriage, divorce, coming out. Sometimes I felt inexperienced in comparison. "You make me feel young again," he told me during one such discussion. "But I worry that I'm holding you back from experiencing things with someone your own age." "I don't want someone my age," I assured him. "I want you." Then there was the matter of my family. They lived in another state, but my mother called regularly, always asking if I'd met any nice girls. Each time I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me. The breaking point came in late summer. My parents announced they were coming to visit for a week. The news sent me into a panic. "I'll have to hide everything," I said to James, pacing in his living room. "All your books at my place, the clothes I keep here, any trace of us." James watched me with a mixture of understanding and sadness. "You know you could just tell them." "I can't," I said, automatically. But even as the words left my mouth, they felt wrong. "David," James said softly, catching my hand to stop my pacing. "I love you. I haven't said it before because I didn't want to pressure you, but I do. And watching you tear yourself apart like this, it hurts." It was the first time either of us had used the word love. I sank onto the couch beside him, overwhelmed. "I love you too," I whispered, realizing as I said it how true it was. That's what makes this so hard. If I tell them and they reject me, reject us? "Then we'll handle it together," he said, squeezing my hand. "But living a lie is destroying you." The week before my parents' visit was tense. I moved all my things back to my house, making it look like the bachelor pad they expected. James kept his distance, though it killed us both. My parents arrived on a Sunday. My mother immediately began reorganizing my kitchen, while my father complained about my lawn maintenance. "You should take lessons from your neighbor," he said, nodding toward James' immaculate yard. "That's how a real man takes care of his property." The irony almost made me laugh. The first few days were torture. I could see James through my window going about his life, but I couldn't go to him. We texted constantly, but it wasn't the same.
On Wednesday night, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "David, honey, I'm worried about you," she said. "You seem different, distant. Is everything okay?" Looking at her concerned face, I suddenly couldn't bear it anymore. All the lies, the hiding, the pretending, it was suffocating me. "Mom, Dad," I called out, my heart pounding. "I need to tell you something." My parents sat on the couch, looking expectant. My father was still holding his evening scotch, my mother's hand resting on his arm. They had no idea their world was about to shift. "I'm gay," I said, the words tumbling out before I could lose my nerve. "And I'm in love with James. We've been together for months." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's glass froze halfway to his lips. "James," my father finally said. "Your neighbor, James?" I nodded, my throat tight. "He's been incredible, Dad. He's helped me understand who I really am." "He's corrupted you, you mean," my father snapped, setting his glass down hard enough to slosh scotch onto the coffee table. "Robert," my mother warned, but her voice was shaky. "No, Margaret, our son tells us he's been seduced by some older man, and we're supposed to be okay with this?" "Nobody seduced me," I said, feeling stronger as I defended James. "I've always been this way. I just couldn't admit it before." My mother was crying silently. "But what about children, your future?" "My future is with James," I said firmly. "And there are other ways to have a family, Mom." My father stood up abruptly. "I need some air." He walked out the front door, letting it slam behind him. Through the window, I could see him pacing on the lawn, his face red in the streetlight. "Give him time," my mother said softly. It's a lot to process." "I know," I replied, sitting beside her. "It was for me, too." She took my hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "Are
You happy? Really happy? More than I've ever been?" She nodded slowly, tears still falling. "Then that's what matters, even if we don't understand it completely." Just then, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, James was standing there, concern etched on his face. "I saw your father outside," he said. "I thought you might need support." My father chose that moment to return. His face darkened when he saw James standing in the doorway. "You," he growled, "how dare you come here?" James remained calm, his posture non-threatening. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand this is difficult." "Difficult? You've turned my son into—" "Dad, stop." I moved between them. "James didn't turn me into anything. I love him." "Love?" My father laughed bitterly. "You're confused, son. This man has manipulated you." "Robert, please," my mother interjected, joining us at the door. She turned to James. "Would you come in? I think we need to talk, all of us." James hesitated, looking at me. I nodded, taking his hand. Together we walked into the living room. My father remained by the door for a long moment before following, his jaw clenched. "How long has this been going on?" my mother asked once we were all seated, James and I on the love seat, my parents across from us. "Since spring," I answered, "but I've known I was gay for much longer. I just couldn't accept it." "And you," my father addressed James directly, "what are your intentions with my son?" "I love him," James said simply. "I want to build a life with him, if he'll have me. He's half your age." "I'm aware of our age difference," James replied calmly. "It was something I struggled with initially, but love doesn't always follow conventional patterns." My mother was watching James intently. "You've been married before. To a woman?" "Yes," James nodded. "For 15 years. I came out later in life, like David. I know how challenging this journey can be." Something in his tone must have reached her, but her expression softened slightly. "David was always different," she said quietly, "more sensitive than his brothers. I used to worry." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders, "but I never wanted him to feel he had to hide who he was." "Margaret," my father warned. "No, Robert, look at our son. Really look at him. When was the last time you saw him this peaceful?" My father did look at me, then really looked, perhaps for the first time in years. I sat straighter, holding James's hand firmly, refusing to hide anymore.
"You've changed," my father finally said, his voice softer. "I noticed it this week, but couldn't place it. You seem more confident." "I am," I replied, "because for the first time in my life, I'm not pretending anymore." The tension in the room slowly began to dissipate. My mother asked James about his teaching, and he spoke passionately about his literature courses. Even my father listened, though he remained mostly quiet. "Would you stay for dinner?" my mother suddenly asked James. I made too much pot roast anyway. It was a small gesture, but an important one. James squeezed my hand. "I'd like that very much," he replied. Dinner was awkward at first, but as the wine flowed, conversation became easier. James told stories about his students, making my mother laugh despite herself. My father asked gruff questions about James's background, his family, his career, treating it like an interrogation, but at least he was engaging. "Your mother would have a fit," my father said at one point, more to himself than anyone. "Probably," I agreed, "but Grandma's not here, and I need to live my truth, Dad." He was quiet for a long moment, swirling his wine. "You always were stubborn," he finally said, "just like me." It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, a start. After dinner, as James prepared to leave, my mother hugged him. It was brief and slightly stiff, but genuine. "Take care of him," she whispered, thinking I couldn't hear. "Always," James promised. My father shook his hand, maintaining his reserved but no longer hostile. That night, after my parents had gone to bed, I snuck over to James's house. We lay in his bed, processing everything that had happened. "You were incredible tonight," I told him. "Thank you for being there." "Where else would I be?" he smiled, pulling me closer. "We're in this together." The next few months brought gradual but significant changes. My parents stayed for another 3 days after the revelation, and each day got a little easier. By the time they left, my mother was hugging both of us goodbye, and my father managed to gruff, "Take care of yourselves." Word spread through the neighborhood, as it inevitably does in small communities. Mrs. Thompson, it turned out, had suspected all along and became one of our strongest allies, bringing cookies and defending us at neighborhood association meetings. Some neighbors stopped speaking to us, others surprised us with their support. Life went on. James and I decided to move in together properly. We chose his house with its beautiful garden and book-lined walls. My modern furniture looked oddly perfect next to his antiques, just as our different personalities complemented each other. My older brother called after hearing the news from our parents. "I always knew," he said. "I was just waiting for you to figure it out." My younger brother took longer to come around, but eventually did, bringing his kids to visit us at Christmas. My father's journey to acceptance was slow but steady. He started calling more often, awkwardly asking about James, making an effort. One day, he showed up unexpectedly with his tools. "Your front steps are wobbly," he announced. "Let me fix them." He and James spent the afternoon working together, talking about home maintenance and gradually life. When they finished, my father clapped James on the shoulder, a simple gesture that meant everything. My mother became our biggest supporter, sending care packages and calling regularly to check on both of us. She even joined PFLAG, surprising us all with her advocacy. One evening, about a year after coming out, James and I sat on our porch swing watching the sunset. The autumn air was crisp, and his garden was ablaze with fall colors. "Any regrets?" he asked, his arm around me. I thought about the past year, the challenges we'd faced, the love we'd found, the truth we'd embraced. "Not one," I replied, leaning into him. "And you?" "Only that we didn't find each other sooner," he smiled. "But then again, maybe we needed to take our separate journeys to be ready for this." Inside, dinner was warming in the oven. My father's repaired steps led up to our front door. James's books mingled with my tech magazines on the coffee table. Everything felt right. "I love you," I said, the words now coming easily, naturally. "I love you too," he replied, kissing my temple as the sun set on our quiet street. I realized that coming out hadn't been an ending at all. It had been a beginning, of honesty, of love, of a life lived authentically. And sitting there with James, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together.